Allow me to introduce you to the most unapologetically Canadian thing that Canadians have ever done. The Global Strategic Maple Syrup Reserve. Somewhere in Quebec is a reserve of maple syrup, protected the way other countries stockpile oil or wheat or weapons-grade uranium. And frankly, I have never felt prouder. Here's how it works. Since about 2000, the Quebec Association of Syrup Producers has run what is like essentially the OPEC of maple syrup. They set quotas, they stabilize prices, they make sure that one bad sugaring season doesn't tank the whole industry. And to do that, they built a reserve, a literal warehouse of syrup. Rows and rows of shiny steel barrels filled with liquid gold. At one point, more than 100 million pounds of syrup sat inside those barrels. That is enough to glaze every Timbit in the country and still have leftovers for the Americans. And then, because this is Canada and we can't have nice things without someone going full Trailer Park Boys, it got robbed. In 2012, thieves pulled off what became known as, and I kid you not, the Great Canadian Maple Syrup Heist. Over the course of months, they siphoned off 9,500 barrels of syrup. That's 3,000 tons, worth about $19 million at the time. They'd rent warehouse space, they would move the barrels around like musical chairs, and quietly replace the real stuff with water. It took a team of RCMP and provincial police, and I assume a few outraged breakfast chefs to crack the case. Eventually, 28 people were arrested, and the syrup was tracked across Quebec, Ontario, New Brunswick, and it even made its way down into the U.S. And we threw the book at them. The ringleader was sentenced to 8 years in prison and a $9 million fine. This reserve is not a gimmick, by the way. Maple syrup is a $1.5 billion industry in Canada. It employs more than 10,000 people. It produces more than 70% of the world's maple syrup. Almost all of that comes from Quebec. It's part of our cultural identity, right? It's part of our history. Indigenous peoples were boiling sap long before Jacques Cartier figured out which end of a canoe to sit in. And when the trees run sweet in the spring, it still feels like a little miracle. Like the land itself decided to reward us for surviving yet another godforsaken winter. So yes, we built a syrup reserve. And if that sounds quaint, good. Let other countries flex with tanks and billionaires. We'll be over here, hoarding sap and running the world's most passive-aggressive cartel.
So we got oak syrup, pine syrup, spruce syrup, 31 flavors, Harold.